The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields when the sky tore open. Maria Santos was feeding her chickens when the first ship appeared, massive and dark against the blue heavens. She dropped the grain bucket and stared as more vessels emerged from what looked like rips in reality itself. The ships were bigger than cities, their hulls gleaming with an oily black sheen that hurt to look at directly. Admiral Thorne of the Craxi Empire watched the primitive planet through his command viewer. The third world from this small yellow star had been under observation for decades. The soft pink creatures below had crude technology and weak bodies. Their weapons were chemical-based projectiles and simple explosives. They fought among themselves constantly, but never developed proper military doctrine. This would be the easiest conquest in coalition history. The initial bombardment began at precisely noon, Earth time. Plasma beams rained down on major population centers. New York's skyline vanished in seconds, replaced by a pillar of superheated air that rose into the stratosphere. London burned as energy weapons carved through ancient stone and modern steel alike. Tokyo's harbor boiled as alien fire struck the water, sending up clouds of steam that could be seen from orbit. President Martinez stood in the emergency bunker deep beneath Washington, watching the feeds from around the world. The alien technology was beyond anything humanity possessed. Their shields deflected missiles like raindrops, their weapons carved through the strongest armor as if it were paper. Every military installation that attempted to fight back was obliterated within minutes. General Stone gripped the situation table with white knuckles. His bombers couldn't penetrate the alien shields. His tanks were scrap metal against their hovering gunships. Even nuclear weapons seemed useless, the aliens simply shooting the missiles down before they could reach their targets. The enemy had orbital supremacy, technological supremacy, and numerical superiority. By every military calculation, Earth had already lost. The aliens established landing zones in major cities across 6 continents. Their ground forces were tall, reptilian creatures with scales that gleamed like metal and eyes that glowed with inner fire. They moved with mechanical precision, setting up fortified positions and energy barriers. The few human military units that engaged them were annihilated with casual efficiency. Dr. Rivers watched the footage from her laboratory at the university. She was a behavioral psychologist who had spent years studying human responses to trauma and stress. What she saw on the screen should have been a population in complete collapse. Cities burning, governments falling, military forces scattered and broken. The textbook said this was when a species surrendered or went extinct, but something was wrong with the expected pattern. In the ruins of New York, she watched survivors emerge from the subway tunnels. They weren't crying or running in panic. They moved with purpose, carrying improvised weapons and showing no fear of the alien patrols above. In London, civilians were already organizing rescue operations, pulling people from collapsed buildings while alien ships circled overhead. In Tokyo, factory workers had barricaded themselves in and were modifying their tools into weapons. The alien field commander Crix reported to Admiral Thorne with growing confusion. The pink creatures weren't behaving according to any known conquest pattern. Most species either fought a formal military engagement and then surrendered, or immediately capitulated when faced with superior force. These humans were doing neither. Instead, they were disappearing. When Craxi ground forces moved through captured cities, they found empty buildings and silent streets. The humans had vanished into tunnels, sewers, and underground spaces the aliens hadn't known existed. Then they would strike without warning. A plasma rifle would be found missing from a guard post. A patrol would vanish entirely, their equipment scattered, and their communication gear broadcasting horrible sounds. In rural areas, the pattern was even more disturbing. Farmer Martinez had watched the aliens burn his neighbor's house from his hidden position in the corn maze. When the patrol moved on, he didn't flee or surrender. Instead, he began digging. By nightfall, he had prepared something the Craxi had never encountered before, a carefully planned ambush using fertilizer, diesel fuel, and 30 years of experience with explosives for clearing stumps. The first Craxi patrol to vanish completely disappeared on a country road in Kansas. They had been investigating what appeared to be a crashed human vehicle. Local farmers found the alien bodies 3 days later, but they weren't celebrating. They were studying, learning, taking measurements and notes like scientists examining interesting specimens. President Martinez addressed the world from his bunker, but his message wasn't one of surrender or despair. His voice was calm, almost conversational, as he spoke to the billions of humans still alive. He told them about the capabilities they had observed in their enemies. He talked about weaknesses they had identified. He gave instructions that sounded less like presidential orders and more like a grandfather teaching children how to hunt dangerous animals. The aliens monitored these broadcasts with growing unease. The humans weren't calling for help from other worlds. They weren't attempting to negotiate. They weren't even expressing fear. Instead, they were sharing information about how to kill Craxi more efficiently. Dr. Rivers compiled her first report on human psychological response to the invasion. What she found defied every model of species behavior under existential threat. Humans weren't just adapting to the presence of alien invaders, they were transforming. Stress hormones that should have caused panic were instead triggering something else entirely. Something that looked almost like excitement. General Stone received reports from the few military units still operational. His soldiers weren't deserting or suffering from combat stress disorder. Instead, they were requesting permission to attempt increasingly dangerous operations against alien positions. They spoke about the enemy with the kind of clinical interest, usually reserved for academic subjects. They had stopped calling the invaders by their species name and started referring to them simply as targets. In the command ship high above Earth, Admiral Thorne reviewed casualty reports with growing concern. The initial bombardment had been devastatingly effective, but since then his forces were taking losses at an unexpected rate, not from military engagements, but from what could only be described as hunting accidents. His soldiers were disappearing in small groups, their equipment later found arranged in patterns that seemed designed to send messages. The messages were very clear. The humans were learning. As the first week of occupation ended, the aliens began to understand that they had made a fundamental error in their intelligence gathering. They had observed humanity during peacetime and assumed that was humanity's natural state. They had seen cities and farms and schools and concluded that these were a peaceful, civilized species. They had not considered that peace might be something humans chose rather than something they defaulted to. In basements and caves and hidden bunkers around the world, humans were making different choices now. The soft pink creatures the aliens had come to conquer were gone. In their place was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Something that had been waiting patiently for 65 million years to show the galaxy what Earth's apex predator could really do when the gloves came off. The old subway tunnel beneath Chicago had become a workshop. Rebecca Cole ran her fingers along the captured alien plasma rifle, studying the energy cell configuration. She had been a mechanical engineer before the invasion, designing car engines and power systems. Now she was learning to reverse engineer weapons that could melt through steel like butter. Around her, other survivors worked with quiet intensity. Tom Walsh, who used to fix air conditioners, was building bombs from alien power cores and household chemicals. Sarah Kim, a former kindergarten teacher, was teaching children how to move silently through rubble and identify alien patrol patterns. Nobody spoke about their old lives anymore. Those people had died the day the ships arrived. Above ground, Captain Brooks led his remaining soldiers through the ruins of downtown. They moved like ghosts, using the city's skeleton as cover. Brooks had thrown away his military manual on the second day of occupation. Everything he had learned about honorable warfare was useless against an enemy with superior technology and no interest in following human rules of engagement. His new tactics were simple. Strike from shadows, take what? You can disappear before the enemy can respond. Leave no survivors who might report your methods. Use the enemy's technology against them. Show them that their advantage only lasted as long as humans played fair. The first major reversal came on day 10 of the occupation. A Craxi patrol had been investigating human movements in the ruins of Detroit when they encountered something unexpected. The humans weren't running or hiding. Instead, they were hunting. Private Jackson had been a deer hunter before the war. He understood patience, wind direction, and the value of a clean shot. The alien he took down with a modified alien rifle had never seen it coming. Neither had the rest of the patrol, who found themselves surrounded by humans who had learned to use their own weapons against them. Dr. Rivers documented the behavioral changes from her hidden laboratory. The transformation was happening faster than any evolutionary model predicted. Humans who had lived peaceful lives for decades were developing predatory instincts that seemed to come from somewhere deep in their genetic memory. Children were learning to track alien movements with the skill of ancient hunters. Adults were showing enhanced pattern recognition when it came to identifying enemy weaknesses. The most disturbing change was in their faces. The fear was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like anticipation. They watched alien patrols the way wolves watch deer. In the rural areas, the changes were even more dramatic. Farmer Martinez had killed his first alien with a trap made from farm equipment and explosives. The second one he took with a modified hunting rifle loaded with alien power cells. By the fourth kill, he had stopped using tools altogether and started using his hands and improvised weapons. He said it felt more personal that way. The alien commander Crix reported to Admiral Thorne with increasing anxiety. The human response pattern was unlike anything in coalition military databases. Most conquered species either organized formal resistance movements or collapsed into random violence. The humans were doing something different. They were learning with unnatural speed and adapting their tactics almost daily. More disturbing was their apparent lack of psychological impact from violence. Craxi soldiers needed time to recover after combat, and many showed signs of trauma after killing. The humans seemed to become more energetic and focused after each successful engagement. Their stress hormones were triggering fight responses that made them more dangerous rather than less stable. General Stone coordinated with resistance cells around the world from his mobile command center. The old military hierarchy had dissolved, replaced by something more fluid and responsive. Orders flowed both ways, with field operatives teaching headquarters new techniques they had discovered while killing aliens. The command structure looked less like a traditional army and more like a pack of hunting predators sharing information about prey. The breakthrough came when Tom Walsh successfully modified an alien communication device to intercept their transmissions. The humans learned that the Craxi used pheromone-based communication that could be disrupted with simple household chemicals. They discovered that alien night vision was limited in certain spectrums. Most importantly, they found that the invaders had psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Rebecca Cole led the first intentional psychological warfare operation. Her team captured a Craxi patrol and released one survivor after ensuring he had witnessed things that would haunt his species' dreams. They let him live specifically so he could tell others about what humans did to enemies who fell into their hands. The technique was crude but effective. Alien morale began dropping as stories spread through their ranks. The humans had learned something the Craxi had never considered. Fear was a weapon that could be more effective than any technology. By the third week of occupation, alien casualties were mounting at an alarming rate, not from massive battles or military engagements, but from what military analysts would have called attrition warfare taken to an extreme. Humans were systematically hunting alien personnel with methods that seemed to improve daily. Private Jackson taught others his tracking techniques. Sarah Kim expanded her lessons to include psychological manipulation and information gathering. Rebecca Cole's workshops produced improvised weapons that combined human ingenuity with alien technology in ways the original designers had never imagined. The most concerning development was the humans' attitude toward their own casualties. Traditional military doctrine assumed that losing personnel would demoralize forces and reduce combat effectiveness. Instead, human casualties seemed to make the survivors more focused and efficient. They studied their own dead to understand what had worked and what hadn't. Then they adapted and tried again. Dr. Rivers observed that the humans were exhibiting characteristics associated with apex predators under ideal hunting conditions. Their stress responses were optimizing for sustained pursuit rather than immediate escape. Their social structures were becoming more pack-oriented, with clear hierarchies based on hunting success rather than previous social status. Most tellingly, they were showing signs of what she could only describe as enjoyment. The successful hunters smiled more. They moved with confidence that bordered on swagger. They talked about their kills, with the satisfaction of craftsmen discussing their work. Admiral Thorne reviewed intelligence reports with growing alarm. The conquest of Earth was supposed to have been completed in the first week. Instead, his forces were being slowly worn down by an enemy that seemed to grow more dangerous with each passing day. The humans weren't just resisting occupation. They were actively studying the Craxi like scientists examining laboratory specimens. The final report from this phase came from Commander Voss, one of the few Craxi officers to survive direct contact with an organized human hunting party. His account described creatures that had once been peaceful farmers and shopkeepers transformed into something that seemed to live for the act of killing. They moved through terrain like it was their natural habitat. They communicated with hand signals and expressions that suggested complex tactical thinking. Most disturbing of all, they showed no anger or hatred toward their enemies. They hunted Craxi with the same calm professionalism that a butcher showed when preparing meat. The invasion fleet began receiving requests for reinforcements and better equipment. The easy conquest had become a grinding war of attrition against an enemy that was learning faster than any species in coalition records. The humans had evolved from prey to predator in less than a month, and they showed no signs of slowing down. In hidden bunkers around the world, human leaders coordinated plans that went far beyond simple resistance. They were preparing for the next phase of the war, when they would stop reacting to alien moves and start taking the initiative. The transformation was complete. Earth no longer hosted a species under attack. It had become the hunting ground of the galaxy's newest apex predator. The Craxi prisoner hung from chains in the basement of what had once been a suburban home. Colonel Davis watched as Dr. Martinez worked with clinical precision, mapping the alien's nervous system responses to various stimuli. The doctor had traded her stethoscope for instruments designed to answer very different questions about anatomy and pain tolerance. Davis had been a career military officer before the invasion, bound by rules of engagement and international law. Those concepts had died along with most of his original unit. The creatures that had burned his soldiers alive deserved nothing resembling mercy, and humanity had discovered they were remarkably creative when mercy was removed from the equation. Tsai Basement Laboratory was part of a network that stretched across the occupied territories. Humans had learned that knowledge was power, and the fastest way to gain knowledge about an enemy was through direct examination of living specimens. The aliens had made the mistake of leaving survivors, and survivors had a tendency to ask uncomfortable questions. Dr. Martinez had discovered that Craxi pain receptors were more sensitive than human ones, distributed in patterns that could be precisely targeted. Their regeneration capabilities were impressive, but not unlimited. Most importantly, their psychological conditioning made them extraordinarily vulnerable to certain types of sensory manipulation. The information gathered in basements like this one flowed through communication networks that had evolved beyond military organization. Rebecca Cole's technical teams had cracked alien encryption protocols and were now broadcasting on frequencies the invaders couldn't block. But instead of propaganda or pleas for help, human transmissions carried something the Craxi had never encountered before. They broadcast the sounds their prisoners made. Captain Brooks led his hunting party through the ruins of Seattle, following intelligence gathered from their latest specimen. The aliens had established a command post in what had been the Space Needle, thinking the elevation would provide tactical advantage. They hadn't considered that humans had been climbing tall structures for construction and maintenance long before the invasion. Brooks's team moved with the confidence of predators who had learned their prey's weaknesses. They wore alien equipment, modified with human improvements. Their weapons were hybrids that combined Craxi energy technology with human understanding of ballistics and explosive devices. Most importantly, they had learned to think like their enemy, then think one step beyond what the enemy expected. The assault on the command post lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the surviving aliens found their communications equipment broadcasting recordings of their comrades' final moments to every Craxi unit on the planet. The humans had learned that psychological warfare was often more effective than conventional weapons, especially against a species that had never encountered an enemy willing to embrace cruelty as a tactical asset. In underground workshops, Tom Walsh supervised the production of weapons that would have horrified the humans who had existed before the invasion. Chemical compounds designed to target alien physiology specifically, biological agents that exploited weaknesses discovered through experimental methodology, devices that combined human engineering with alien technology to create effects neither species had imagined alone. The work was performed with the same careful attention to detail that had once gone into building cars and appliances. Quality control was maintained through field testing on captured specimens. Improvements were implemented based on user feedback from hunting teams. The entire process had the efficiency of an industrial operation combined with the enthusiasm of a hobby. Sarah Kim had expanded her educational programs beyond basic survival skills. The children in the underground communities were learning mathematics through ballistics calculations. They practiced reading by studying alien technical manuals. Their artwork depicted increasingly sophisticated methods of trap construction and ambush tactics. The new generation was growing up with skills their parents had learned as adults under stress. For them, hunting aliens was as natural as any other childhood game. They showed the same pride in successful kills that previous generations had shown for academic achievements or sports victories. Admiral Thorne reviewed casualty reports that defied military logic. His forces weren't losing major battles because the humans avoided large-scale engagements. Instead, they were dying in small groups from what could only be described as systematic predation. The humans had turned warfare into a form of hunting that seemed to follow rules no civilized species would recognize. The psychological impact on Craxi forces was becoming as significant as the physical casualties. Soldiers reported nightmares about human faces appearing in shadows. Patrols requested larger group sizes, not for tactical advantage, but for emotional comfort. Medical officers documented stress responses that indicated their personnel were being psychologically conditioned to fear their enemy through methods that seemed designed for that specific purpose. Dr. Rivers observed the changes in human society with fascination and growing alarm. The transformation had gone beyond adaptation to environmental pressures. Humans were exhibiting behavioral patterns that suggested they were actively enjoying the conflict. Social hierarchies now revolved around hunting success. Art and music had evolved to celebrate violence against the invaders. Most concerning was the apparent permanence of the changes. Humans who achieved success in anti-alien operations showed brain chemistry alterations that appeared to be self-reinforcing. The more effectively they killed, the more satisfaction they derived from killing. The behavior was becoming hardwired into their psychological patterns. Commander Price led the assault on the alien stronghold in Chicago with tactics that would have been considered war crimes before the invasion. Her forces had learned to use the aliens' own biological processes against them. Captured alien technology was modified to produce effects that caused maximum psychological impact on enemy personnel. The stronghold fell after a siege that lasted 3 days. The few alien survivors were processed through interrogation procedures that extracted every piece of useful intelligence before. They were released to spread word of what capture by humans entailed. The systematic nature of the operation demonstrated how thoroughly humans had integrated cruelty into their tactical planning. In laboratories hidden throughout the occupied territories, researchers like Dr. Martinez continued their work with alien specimens. The knowledge gained from these experiments was being applied to develop increasingly sophisticated methods of psychological and physical manipulation. The research was conducted with the same methodical approach that had once been applied to medical research, but with very different ethical guidelines. The humans had discovered that their enemies possessed regenerative capabilities that made extended experimentation possible. This revelation had opened new possibilities for information gathering and psychological warfare that were being enthusiastically explored by research teams across the planet. General Stone coordinated global resistance operations from a mobile command center that moved constantly to avoid alien detection. His forces had evolved beyond traditional military structure into something resembling a pack-hunting organization. Orders were suggestions. Results were what mattered. Success was measured in alien casualties and intelligence gathered. The Resistance had learned that the Craxi High Command monitored their communications and could track their technology. Instead of hiding these capabilities, humans had turned them into weapons. False intelligence was deliberately transmitted to lure alien forces into prepared killing zones. Real operations were coordinated through methods the aliens couldn't intercept or understand. By the second month of occupation, the nature of the conflict had fundamentally changed. The aliens were no longer conducting a conquest. They were struggling to survive against an enemy that had transformed warfare into something resembling a particularly violent form of entertainment. The humans broadcast their activities openly, not to demoralize their enemies, but to attract more prey. They had learned that fear made the hunting more interesting, and nothing generated fear like allowing survivors to spread detailed accounts of what happened to those who were captured. The invasion fleet began receiving requests for immediate evacuation from ground forces. Reports described an enemy that seemed to derive energy from conflict, that became more dangerous with each engagement, and that showed no interest in conventional military objectives like territory or resources. The humans appeared to be fighting, for the simple pleasure of fighting, and they were very good at it. In the hidden communities beneath Earth's surface, children played games that involved capturing and interrogating toy aliens. Adults shared techniques for maximizing information extraction while prolonging specimen viability. Art installations celebrated successful hunting operations with displays that would have horrified previous generations. The transformation was complete. Humanity had discovered that they possessed capabilities they had never needed to develop during peacetime. The aliens had provided them with the perfect opportunity to explore these capabilities in depth. They were discovering that they enjoyed the exploration very much. The alien fortress that had once been downtown Los Angeles fell silent at dawn. Commander Price walked through corridors that still hummed with alien technology, stepping over the remains of the final Craxi defensive position. Her soldiers moved. Like shadows behind her, their movements precise and economical. They had learned efficiency from months of hunting, and efficiency meant no wasted motion, no unnecessary noise, no survivors. The fortress had been considered impregnable by Craxi. Standards, energy shields, automated defense systems, and a full battalion of their best soldiers. It had lasted exactly 4 hours against Price's assault team. The humans had learned to turn the aliens' own technology against them in ways the original designers had never imagined. Price found the command center where Admiral Keth had made his final stand. The alien commander lay among his staff, their bodies arranged in the precise patterns that had become humanity's signature. Not random violence, but deliberate communication. The message was always the same. This is what happens when you bring war to our world. The transformation of human society was complete. Children born during the occupation had never known a world where aliens weren't prey. They learned to walk by following hunting parties through the ruins. Their first words were tactical terms. They showed the same pride in their first kill that previous generations had shown for their first steps. Dr. Rivers completed her final psychological assessment from her new laboratory in the captured alien medical facility. The changes in human behavior were no longer temporary adaptations to stress. They were permanent evolutionary leaps that had occurred within a single generation. Humans had become something new, something that existed in a state of controlled predation. The most remarkable discovery was that humans seemed to require the hunting activity to maintain psychological stability. Individuals who went too long without engaging alien targets showed signs of depression and anxiety that disappeared immediately upon resuming active operations. The war had become more than survival. It had become a biological necessity. In the Basab underground cities that had grown throughout the occupied territories, human society had reorganized around principles that would have been unrecognizable to previous generations. Leadership was determined by hunting success. Education focused on tactics, technology, and alien biology. Art and entertainment celebrated successful kills and innovative torture techniques. Tom Walsh had become the leading expert on hybrid human-alien technology. His workshops produced weapons that combined the best aspects of both species engineering. But more than that, he had learned to think like both predator and prey, understanding how to create tools that would be most effective against enemies, who were adapting to human tactics. The weapons that emerged from his facilities were works of art that happened to be designed for killing. Each one was customized for specific operational requirements. Some were built for maximum psychological impact, others prioritized information extraction from living targets. All of them reflected a level of creative cruelty that had emerged from humanity's newfound relationship with violence. General Stone coordinated the final phase of Earth's liberation from his command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The resistance had evolved beyond military organization into something resembling a pack-hunting society with global coordination. Every human settlement was connected through communication networks that shared tactical information, successful techniques, and locations of alien concentrations. The aliens had stopped calling it an occupation. Their communications, intercepted and decoded by human intelligence teams, referred to Earth as a hunting preserve, where humans had become the apex predator. Requests for evacuation were being denied by high command, but individual units were beginning to desert their positions rather than face another encounter with human hunting parties. Captain Brooks led his team through the subway tunnels beneath New York, tracking the last major alien concentration on the eastern seaboard. His soldiers moved with the confidence of apex predators who had learned to hunt the most dangerous game in the galaxy. They wore trophies taken from previous kills, not for intimidation, but as markers of professional achievement. The aliens had retreated to the deepest tunnels, hoping that confined spaces would limit human tactical advantages. Instead, they had trapped themselves in an environment where humans excelled. The underground had become humanity's natural habitat, and they moved through it with the ease of creatures designed for such spaces. The final assault lasted 12 hours. When it ended, Brooks's team had eliminated every alien in the tunnel complex except for 3 specimens selected for intelligence gathering and eventual release. The survivors would carry word to other alien concentrations about the fate of those who lingered on Earth. Dr. Martinez had perfected her interrogation techniques through months of practice with captured aliens. Her methods combined human understanding of psychology with detailed knowledge of craxi physiology gained through experimental research. The information extraction process was both more efficient and more thorough than anything the aliens had encountered from other species. The intelligence gathered from these sessions was immediately shared with hunting teams worldwide. Humans had learned that information was the most valuable resource in asymmetric warfare, and they had developed remarkably effective methods for obtaining it from unwilling sources. In the orbital platforms that had once coordinated the invasion, Admiral Thorne reviewed reports that documented the complete collapse of Craxi military effectiveness on Earth. His forces weren't retreating from superior numbers or technology. They were fleeing from an enemy that seemed to exist solely for the purpose of hunting and killing. The psychological profiles of surviving personnel painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything in coalition databases. The humans showed no interest in territorial control, resource extraction, or political objectives. They appeared to fight for the simple pleasure of fighting, and they had developed capabilities that made them extraordinarily effective at it. Most disturbing was the apparent permanence of the human transformation. Intelligence suggested that the behavioral changes were being passed to offspring through cultural transmission and possibly genetic modification. Earth was no longer producing a species that could be conquered. It was producing a species designed for conquest. Rebecca Cole supervised the final modifications to captured alien spacecraft in the underground hangar that had been carved from a Kansas grain silo. The ships were being redesigned with human improvements that focused on hunting effectiveness rather than exploration or transport. The modifications turned them into weapons platforms optimized for tracking and destroying fleeing prey. The human space program had been transformed from scientific exploration to predator expansion. The modified alien vessels were crewed by volunteers who had shown exceptional performance in ground operations. Their mission was simple: follow the retreating aliens and ensure that no one escaped to warn other species about what Earth had become. Commander Price received confirmation that the last alien strongholds on every continent had been eliminated. The occupation was over, but the war was not. Humanity had tasted victory through methods that had awakened something primal and powerful. They had learned that they were very good at hunting, and they wanted to continue practicing their skills. The children who had grown up during the occupation were now adolescents with capabilities that frightened even their own parents. They moved through the ruins of cities like apex predators, surveying their territory. They spoke of the galaxy beyond Earth as a hunting ground full of prey that didn't yet know what it was. Dr. Rivers filed her final report on human psychological evolution during the war. The species that had existed before the invasion was extinct, replaced by something that maintained human intelligence and creativity while adding predatory instincts that had been dormant for millennia. The combination was producing capabilities that no other species had ever developed. The most concerning finding was that humans now required external targets to maintain psychological stability. Peace was no longer a natural state for the species. They needed enemies to hunt, challenges to overcome, and prey to pursue. The war had changed them in ways that could never be reversed. General Stone broadcast the final message to the retreating alien fleet. The transmission was brief and direct. Earth was no longer interested in coexistence with species that brought war to human worlds. The galaxy contained many worlds, with many species. Humanity was looking forward to meeting them all. The aliens had come to conquer a peaceful species, and instead had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. They had learned what humans really were when the facade of civilization was stripped away. They were apex predators who had been pretending to be something else, and they were tired of pretending. The last alien transport ship limped away from Earth's orbit, its hull scarred by human weapons and its crew broken by months of systematic predation. Admiral Thorne watched his homeworld shrink in the view screen, knowing he would never see it again. The humans had made it clear that survivors were allowed to leave for one purpose only: to carry word of what Earth had become to the rest of the galaxy. Behind them, the blue world that had once seemed so peaceful now bristled with captured. Alien technology turned to darker purposes. Human settlements dotted the surface, connected by networks that pulsed with communications about hunting techniques, tactical innovations, and plans for expansion beyond their home system. The species that had once farmed wheat and built cities now bred warriors and designed weapons. General Stone stood in the command center that had once been buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, but now rose above ground as a monument to human transformation. Around him, screens displayed the locations of human expeditionary forces throughout the solar system. They had learned to pilot alien ships with crews that included volunteers modified with captured biotechnology to enhance their hunting capabilities. The modifications were extensive and irreversible. Humans with enhanced reflexes, improved sensory perception, and resistance to alien weapons served as the vanguard of the species' expansion beyond Earth. They showed the same enthusiasm for space-based hunting that their planet-bound counterparts displayed in terrestrial operations. Dr. Rivers documented the final phase of human evolution in her laboratory within the captured alien medical facility. The changes that had begun as stress responses had become permanent genetic modifications that were being passed to offspring. Children born after the war possessed capabilities that seemed designed specifically for interspecies conflict. These new humans showed enhanced pattern recognition when studying alien technology. Their social development favored pack hunting behaviors over individual achievement. Most remarkably, they displayed what could only be described as biological imperative toward seeking out and engaging non-human intelligences in combat situations. The psychological profiles painted a picture of a species that had evolved beyond its original parameters within a single generation. Humanity no longer produced individuals capable of sustained peace. They required external challenges, preferably in the form of technologically advanced enemies, to maintain mental and physical health. Commander Price led the first human expedition beyond the solar system in a fleet of modified alien vessels. Her crews were volunteers who had distinguished themselves during the Earth campaign through exceptional performance in hunting and intelligence operations. They wore their modifications with pride, knowing that they represented the cutting edge of human evolution. The fleet's destination was the Craxi homeworld, following navigation data extracted from captured personnel during interrogation sessions that had lasted for months. The mission parameters were simple. Establish human presence in the Craxi home system and begin expansion operations using techniques proven effective during the Earth campaign. The ships themselves were works of art that happened to be optimized for predation. Human engineers had redesigned every system with lessons learned from hunting aliens in Earth's cities and wilderness. The vessels could track fleeing enemies across interstellar distances, operate independently for extended periods, and carry sufficient resources for establishing hunting preserves on multiple worlds. In the underground cities that had replaced Earth's former settlements, children played games that involved mock space battles and planetary invasion scenarios. Their toys were scale models of hybrid human-alien weapons. Their stories featured heroes who traveled between stars seeking new species to hunt and conquer. The cultural transformation was complete. Human art, music, and literature now celebrated themes that would have horrified previous generations. Success was measured in terms of hunting efficiency and technological adaptation. Beauty was found in weapons design and tactical innovation. Heroes were those who had developed new methods for tracking and eliminating non-human intelligences. Tom Walsh supervised the construction of the first human starships designed from scratch rather than modified from captured alien vessels. These ships incorporated lessons learned from studying dozens of alien technologies, combined with human engineering principles that prioritized hunting effectiveness over exploration or diplomacy. The starship construction facilities had been built using alien labor captured during the final phases of the Earth campaign. The aliens worked with the efficiency of individuals who understood that their survival depended on maintaining their usefulness to their human captors. Those who showed exceptional skill in starship construction were allowed to live long enough to train others. Captain Brooks commanded the second wave of human expansion, leading fleets toward the coordinates of other coalition member species extracted during interrogation operations. His crews were composed entirely of volunteers from the generation that had grown up during the war. They possessed capabilities that exceeded those of the original resistance fighters. These new humans moved through space with the same confidence they had shown in Earth's ruins. They understood alien technology intuitively and could adapt captured equipment for human use within hours of acquisition. Most importantly, they showed no psychological stress from extended combat operations against non-human enemies. Dr. Martinez had established medical research facilities on captured alien worlds throughout the solar system. Her work focused on developing methods for rapid human adaptation to non-terrestrial environments and alien physiologies. The research was conducted using alien specimens captured during expansion operations with techniques refined through years of practice during the Earth campaign. The results exceeded all expectations. Humans could now survive in environments that would have killed their ancestors within minutes. They could process alien foods, breathe modified atmospheres, and resist biological weapons designed specifically to target human physiology. The modifications were becoming hereditary, creating a species designed for expansion across hostile environments. Rebecca Cole monitored communications from human expeditionary forces throughout the local galactic region. The reports painted a picture of systematic expansion that combined human tactical innovation with alien technology stolen from conquered worlds. Each new species encountered provided additional opportunities for technological acquisition and biological research. The human expansion pattern was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Previous conquering species had focused on resource extraction or territorial control. Humans appeared to expand solely for the purpose of finding new enemies to hunt. They showed no interest in establishing permanent colonies or exploiting planetary resources beyond what was necessary to support hunting operations. Admiral Foster commanded the human deep space fleet from the bridge of a vessel that had been grown rather than built, using biotechnology derived from multiple alien species. The ship's living systems could adapt to changing tactical situations autonomously, while its weapons incorporated design principles from every species humanity had encountered and defeated. The fleet carried a cargo more valuable than any treasure: the knowledge gained from studying dozens of alien species under controlled conditions. Human scientists had learned to identify biological and psychological weaknesses in species they had never encountered before, using patterns derived from extensive experimental research. Each new world visited by human forces became a laboratory for testing techniques against previously unknown alien physiologies. The research was conducted with the same methodical approach that had characterized the Earth campaign, but on a scale that encompassed entire star systems. In the ruins of what had once been Washington, President Martinez addressed the human population through communication networks that spanned multiple solar systems. Her message was simple. The galaxy contained thousands of species on millions of worlds, and humanity had just begun to explore the possibilities for expansion and research. The speech was broadcast simultaneously to human forces throughout explored space and to alien civilizations that had intercepted human communications. The message was intended for both audiences. Humans should prepare for unlimited expansion opportunities, and aliens should understand that resistance would only provide additional research opportunities. The transformation of human society had reached its logical conclusion. Every aspect of civilization now served the ultimate purpose of finding, studying, and defeating non-human intelligences. Education, technology, art, and social organization had all evolved to support this single objective with ruthless efficiency. Children born in the post-invasion era showed capabilities that seemed designed by evolution for interspecies warfare. They learned alien languages by studying captured communications. They developed new weapons by combining technologies from species separated by thousands of light years. They planned invasion strategies for worlds they had never seen. General Stone received reports from the furthest human expeditions operating in regions of space that had never seen human presence before. The reports confirmed that the expansion was proceeding ahead of schedule, with new species being cataloged and studied on a regular basis. Each encounter provided additional data for the growing human database of alien weaknesses. The most successful operations involved psychological warfare campaigns that preceded physical invasion by months or years. Humans had learned to use captured alien communication networks to spread information about human capabilities throughout target populations. The fear generated by these campaigns often eliminated the need for extended military operations. Dr. Rivers compiled the final analysis of human post-war evolution. The species had successfully transformed from a single-world civilization focused on internal development to a multi-system predator society designed for unlimited expansion. The psychological changes that had begun during the Earth campaign were now hardwired into human genetic patterns. Most remarkably, humans had developed biological mechanisms that prevented them from returning to their pre-war state. Peace was no longer psychologically possible for the species. They required constant expansion and conquest to maintain mental and physical health. They had become something that could never again coexist peacefully with other forms of intelligence. The final human message broadcast to the galaxy was transmitted simultaneously from thousands of worlds across hundreds of star systems. It was brief and direct. Humanity had awakened to its true nature and would continue expanding until every world had been visited and every species had been studied. Resistance was welcome, as it provided valuable research opportunities. The aliens who had invaded Earth had intended to add one more world to their empire. Instead, they had awakened a species that would transform the galaxy into a hunting preserve, where humans were the apex predator and every other form of intelligence existed solely as prey or research material. In the end, the invasion had succeeded, beyond the aliens' wildest dreams. They had indeed discovered what monsters humans really were. The tragedy was that they had learned this lesson too late to prevent those monsters from being released upon an unsuspecting universe. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity was just getting started.